Kaftakar, Outer Rim, Rebel Base, 471 days after Geonosis. Darman decided that Null Sergeant Aiden was a man after his own heart. Can't think straight on an empty stomach. Aiden fired his blaster into a nest of twig shavings to get the campfire going. The sun was coming up. They'd lost a night's sleep. Then, and the lizard-like Gaftakari were still trotting back and forth in neat lines ferrying the weapons they'd collected from the drop. Got some stew left over from last night. Don't ask what's in it, 'cause I didn't. Omega Squad sat cross-legged around the fire in their black undersuits, armor plates stacked to one side. Otten held Darman's jetpack on his lap and bent the wing hinge assembly back into shape with a pair of blunt-nosed grips. He hated letting mechanical things get the better of him. So what happened to the ARC? MIA, Aiden said. His tone was totally neutral, and his expression blank. It wasn't his usual demeanor either, because Darman could see the white lines in the deeply tanned skin around his eyes and mouth. Aiden usually smiled a lot, but he wasn't smiling now. So I've done a recce of AAT, and I've put together as complete a plan of the government buildings as I can. Sep Force strength? Niner asked. Apart from the locals, minimal. I thought this was a hotbed of Sep activity that had to be neutralized pronto. Oh dear, Niarvad, you've been taking intel at face value again, haven't you? Aiden built the fire with meticulous care, stacking branches and dry grasses on the mound and watching the flames grow. We better cure you of that. Fee peered into the pot of stew. It's okay. I've been teaching him sarcasm. He'll be ready for comic exaggeration soon. Looks quite a nice, peaceful place, Otten said. Not exactly strategic. Yet? Aiden stirred the pot with a stick. It really did smell good. Lovely city. Clean, pretty buildings. Lots of harmless fun to enjoy. And of no military use to us whatsoever. Darman kept an eye on the Gaftakari. Now that the sun was coming up, he could see that their light beige scales were slightly iridescent. They had sharp muzzles and small black eyes with disturbing red slit-like pupils. And he'd never seen so many varied weapons strung on one belt. They were more tooled up than Sergeant Cal in a bad mood. Their blades, blasters, and metal bars jingled like wind chimes. One tall lizard provided his own musical accompaniment as he walked, swinging his tail to balance under a load of E-web parts. I see you taught them all about stealth, then, Otten said. Aiden stared at him. Prudy warned me that you were an awkward customer. Funny. Ordo warned Prudy I was argumentative. Your reputation precedes you, then, said Aiden. They're good fighters. Trust me. I hear a butt coming, said Niner. We're specially trained to hear that coming at 100 clicks. But Aiden slopped the stew into their waiting mess tins. When Darman was this hungry, he'd eat flimsy packing cases. Yes, the but is that this is going to end in tears. Ayat human city. All the cities are human settlements, but scruffy little villages, lizard land. So who are the Gaftakari? They all are. Neither species is native. The human colonists brought in the lizard lads to build the place, and now the lizards want to run the show on account of their numbers. Actually, the lizards are Marits. Why are the Seps supporting the humans, then? Because the Republic wants the Calarium and Norax deposits here, or at least Shenio mining does, and the humans are happier without Shenio moving in. I'm lost, said Niner. The Seps have offered to save Gaftakar from us. So we're going to give them something to object to? I don't make the policy. I just train guerrillas and slot bad guys. They lapsed into silence and ate the stew, which was actually remarkably tasty. The rebels, the Marits, had started assembling an E-web without the manual, and the way a group of them clustered around the heavy blaster and handled the components gave Darman the impression that they swarmed over their enemies. There was something about the rapid and coordinated movements that reminded him of insects and unnerved him. Why are you a sergeant and the rest of the Nulls are officers? Fee asked. Didn't you pass your promotion board? Aiden didn't seem offended. It was hard to tell what would provoke a Null. Sometimes it took nothing at all. I preferred to be an NCO. If it's good enough for Kalbur, it's good enough for me. Fee seemed satisfied with the explanation. Aten was concentrating on his stew, and Niner was watching the Marats getting to grips with the large artillery piece. They're good at assembling things, Aiden said. Good visuospatial ability. It was the first time any of them had met Aiden, and Darman was always keen to get the measure of another of Skirata's nulls. How had he managed to keep them apart from the commandos during training for so many years? The young nulls terrified the Kaminoans by running wild around Tapoka City, and that was about the only time the commando squad saw them, stealing equipment, sabotaging systems, and Darman had never forgotten this, even scaling the supports of the huge dome ceilings, swinging around hundreds of meters above the floor, and placing blaster fire to within centimeters of the Kaminoan technicians. The nulls never cared, never seemed afraid. Even then, they answered only to Kalskirata, and the Kaminoans wouldn't dare cross Kalbuir. Kalbuir said the Kaminoans had messed up the nulls, and so they deserved what they got. If the Kaminoans complained, he said, he'd sort them. Skirata used sort as a euphemism for any form of violence, his specialist subject. A Marat trotted over and peered into the stew, head jerking slightly like a droid. "You like it?" Aten, kneeling down to help himself to another portion, looked up innocently. The scar across his face, the one that Val had given him, was a thin white line now. "It's very tasty." "My great-grandmother," the Marat beamed. It was weird to watch a lizard smile like a human. They seemed to have a double row of small triangular teeth. "She'll be happy." Darman noticed Aiden slide forward a little and try to interrupt the exchange. "Aten." But Aten was off, being polite to the locals and taking his heart's and mind's role seriously. "Is it her recipe, then?" "Aten." "It's her," said the Marat, and wandered off. Aten stared into the bowl. There was a moment of complete silence, and Aiden sighed. Fee put his knuckles to his mouth to stifle nervous laughter, but it didn't work. Niner chewed to a halt. Darman tried to be culturally sensitive and all that, but he was hungry, and the Marat seemed pleased they were enjoying the meal. "Oh, Fearfeck!" Aten put his mess tin down on the ground and sat back on his heels. He screwed his eyes shut tight, and judging by the way his lips compressed, he was in serious digestive crisis, as Ordo called it. Then he rocked back on his heels, stood up, and bolted for the nearest bushes. "He's throwing up," Niner said, and went on eating. The faint sound of retching confirmed his diagnosis. Aiden shrugged. "It's not like they killed her to eat her. It's how they dispose of their dead. They like to think they do their families some good after they're gone. It's rude not to tuck in." "Cultural diversity's a wonderful thing," Fee observed, but he looked quite pale. "What do they do for desserts?" Niner fished out a chunk of lean meat and gazed at it, then popped it into his mouth and chewed thoughtfully. Darman didn't know he could be so daring. "I never thought I'd resort to cannibalism." "It's not cannibalism for us, Niner," Aiden said. "Just for them. That's the Grand Army for you." Fee's face seemed back to its normal color again. "See the galaxy, meet fascinating new species, and snack on them. Well, we wouldn't be alone." Aiden looked up, all concern, as Aten walked back unsteadily from the bushes, wiping his mouth. "You okay? You did that deliberately. You could have told me before I started eating." "I said don't ask, and I said I hadn't." A teen quiet, methodical Aten had been one of Val's training company, not Skirata's. It showed. Aiden stared at Aten, and Aten stared back. Niner rolled his eyes as if he was shaping up to separate them, and it wouldn't have been the first time that Aten needed hauling out of a confrontation. There was something about the way Val trained his men that gave them a core of wildness, a complete inability to see sense and back down when pushed too far. Aiden almost broke into a grin. "You tried to vibroblade Val, didn't you? We all heard about that." Aten gave him the silent routine. Darman waited for Aiden to run out of patience and give Aten a good slap, as Fee liked to call it, but he just shrugged and rummaged in his pockets. "Okay," said Aiden. He found what he was looking for and tossed a ration bar across to Otten, who caught it. First, you can grow a Shabla beard, because you're going to have to infiltrate Ayat, and they're not used to seeing quads. Mix yourselves up a bit and choose who gets to stay looking normal. Fee perked up immediately. I'll dress up as a lizard if I can have a trip into town. Done, Aiden said. But scrub the scaly look, because Marits don't go into the cities now, except to shoot the locals. That's why a human's best suited to do assassinations. Once you've got your bearings, I want 2 of you to recce Ayat again and get a few spy cams planted. The Marits can't go in unnoticed, and whatever intel Sol put together went with him. Sol? Said Fee. Alpha 30, Aiden said. That was his name. Sol. Darman finished his stew and watched Aiden. He wasn't pleased, that much was obvious. Maybe it was having to follow up on an Alpha ARC when he thought he had more important business. Maybe it was just normal irritation at being tasked to carry out a mission that looked pointless and wasn't resourced. He worked alone, and that had to take its toll on any man's will. Niner scraped out his mess tin and rinsed it clean with water from his bottle. I think we should be concentrating our forces on kicking the Osik out of the main SEP homeworlds, he said suddenly. Because if we keep this up, we'll be down to 1 clone per planet, showing the locals a field manual on how to throw stones. Aiden turned his head slowly and parted his lips as if to speak. He paused. He seemed to be measuring his words. You're in good company, he said. Lots of us do, including General Zay. But the Chancellor wants to avoid too much collateral damage. No pounding, no surging, no offending the civvies. No resources. Enough resources not to lose, but not enough to win, Aiden said. He's just feeding a stalemate, the moron. Darman thought it was time they got on with making friends with the Marits. He stood up and ambled over to the lizards, wondering if there might be anything in Ayat that he could acquire for Attain. It was hard to think of anything that a Jedi might want. They avoided possessions. You know what's been bothering me? Fee's voice drifted across the center of the camp. The Marits had finished calibrating the artillery piece and were admiring it. What if the war had broken out when we were 5 years into our training instead of 8, 9, 10? What? Aiden asked. Nobody knows when a war's going to start, not years ahead anyway. It's not like you can book one in advance. So there we are, fully trained, and then it all kicks off. Very lucky. What if it had all gone to Poodoo years before? What if we'd been half-trained, still just kids? Then we'd have been fighting in diapers, Otten muttered, because the Republic didn't have any other army worth a mott's backside. Fee raised an eyebrow. Shabla lucky, if you ask me. Time to move it, Aiden said sharply, and Darman suspected he was breaking up the speculation for a reason. Judging by the expression on Fee's face, he felt that too. I'll bring you up to speed with the local situation, and you can spend the rest of the day getting to know our allies. The longer the war went on, the less sense it made to Darman. After years of clear certainty and training knowing what he had to do, and why he would have to do it, because there had never been any doubt in anyone's mind that they would one day be deployed, the reality of the war didn't match any of it. Shambolic organization, indecisive leadership from the top, and too many gray areas. The more places he was sent, the more things Darman saw that made him ask why they didn't just let planets seed from the Republic. Life would go on. Fee's thinking was getting to him. Every thought now started with a why. Stay busy. There was nothing he could about it now except get on with his job. He smiled at the Marits. I'm Darman, he said, holding out his hand for shaking. Want me to show you how to make shrapnel out of a droid?